Welcome to Work, Learn, Repeat, the cooperative and experiential education podcast from the University of Waterloo that explores work-integrated learning and what's needed to prepare students, employers, and educators for the future of work. I'm your host, Jody Szymanski. Today we're going to talk to the Associate Provost of Cooperative and Experiential Education, Dr. Nora McCrae. We'll reflect on the continued growth of work-integrated learning in our portfolio and how we prepare emerging talent for the future of work. So on our last podcast, we really focused on reflection as a piece of quality work-integrated learning. Why is it important that we also reflect on what we do here as a unit?
Well, I think everyone should be reflecting all the time, right? On how things are going, what could you do better, what worked well, all of that I think should be a natural part of everyone's thinking process, which is what we promote in our students and should certainly be promoting in ourselves as well as we try to get better at how we do our work.
And how does that reflection help us get better at our work?
Well, I think if you think about, just as I've said, what you've done and then analyze it from what were the outcomes, did that make a difference, what could have gone better, how could that be improved for next time around, then hopefully if you're reflecting and actually with integrity and honesty looking at those things and then making changes accordingly, that should lead to better outcomes.
And it really helps you prepare for that next step, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think so. I think often reflection doesn't happen in a systematic way in organizations, and then all sorts of things come into play which make it difficult for people to actually then change, because it's very easy. It's a lot easier to do the same thing over and over again.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Especially when people are resistant to change. As you look back at your time here at Waterloo, what are some of the reflections that you have about cooperative and experiential education?
Well, I think that I continue to feel that it is not only critical to how students learn, giving them the opportunity to apply what they've learned in various workplaces, and in so doing, deepen their understanding. I mean, it's classic experiential learning theory.
Right.
Deepen their understanding of what it is that they've been learning, put it into a range of different contexts to then make meaning about that for their own personal growth and development. So that continues continues to hold very true in all the forms of work integrated learning and experiential that we engage with. That fundamental truth hasn't shifted at all in my mind anyway. And as I think about what's happening in higher ed right now globally, and what seems to be the trend with the way that people can gain information and content and learn theory does not have to occur in a classroom.
Right.
There are all sorts of ways you can get information, and that's just being disrupted more and more and more, as we know. So what will be the value proposition of a university or college education? And in my mind, it's the opportunity to have meaningful experiences that are constructed in such a way that it's not just like experiences can happen, they happen all the time.
Right.
But in an educational condition where it's linked to learning, there are some learning outcomes, there's reflection, and it's supported, then those experiences allow for those outcomes that we see, that learning, that deepening, that development. And I think I do believe that the work that we do is going to become even more important as a value proposition for higher education, because that's a hard thing to replicate.
Right.
You can have all sorts of sources of knowledge, and you can have experiences all over the place.
Right.
But putting those things together in a meaningful way with frameworks like we have developed at Waterloo. For example, the Future Ready Talent Framework, what are the skills you're going to need to be successful, and giving a frame of reference for that. The work we've been doing around purpose to give people a frame of reference around that brings order to chaos and really helps people move forward. And I would say that certainly my time at the University of Waterloo has demonstrated that not only do we do that really well, but we're continuing to do that in a very profound way, and which could become even more important to the institution itself.
Well, and it really goes to that piece of global leadership, and it's why we have projects like the Work Learn Institute, which is helping other countries around the world build similar systems so that they too can educate their students differently in a way that prepares them for the future.
Absolutely. The Work Learn Institute and how that's changed over the last few years to have not only the research component, but now this consulting component really does allow us to share quality experiences. And I think that that's an important piece, is that we want to maintain not a semblance, but actual quality in this work.
Right.
It's very easy to do experiential work integrated learning in a shoddy manner, which undermines the value for all the players involved and then is a threat to actually how we do our work. So I think that's a very important part of Work Learn, and the consulting that they're doing is based on our quality work,
Right.
so that we make sure that that maintains a certain level of, no matter who we're talking to, ourselves or others, which is really important for us as well. So it's a benefit to us too.
Yeah. And how does that then help the employers and help them get ready for the future?
Which part? Quality?
Just the whole system that you're describing and making sure that we've got that quality and, giving the students that experiential education and even, does it help shift that focus of how many people are thinking of academic institutions nowadays?
Well, let's start with some of the parts of that question. How it benefits employers is in a very transactional way. Employers are looking for talent.
Right.
They're looking for talent that aligns with what their organizational goals are. So that means talent that's got the skills that can do stuff
Right.
that they want done. So in a very basic manner, the nature of our program delivers on that.
Right.
So that's important for employers, and why that's important. When you add the quality pieces to that, then we're not just saying to employers, here are a whole pile of students, take your pick, but we're saying to employers, look, we're helping you find the talent that works for you and that's aligned with their academic programs where they're actually learning stuff that's going to be a benefit. We've got the supports around that so that this learning experience does add value.
Right.
Because there are lots of experiential learning programs around the world where students go off and they find something, there's no support around that, and it can be not necessarily helpful to employers.
Right.
So what we do is set that up so it is a positive experience for the most part, but it is a learning experience. So everyone's at different stages. So I think in very basic terms, that's why it's good for employers.
Right.
Quality programming means quality outputs. Also, the nature of our co-op program, with the amount of time that students are spending in workplaces, means there's a level of intensity that also doesn't happen in other forms of experiential.
Right.
Because they're there for at least 4 months, full time. They're treated like an employee. That just in and of itself has a different kind of outcome than if someone's coming in for a month or a bit of a job shadow or whatever it might look like. So again, that also benefits employers because the likelihood, and we know this from the research that's been done, of their return on investment for an employee, having a student in their workplace is going to be worth it to them. And I think the more we have these positive relationships, and Waterloo has had these wonderful relationships with employers for, what is it now, 68 years? Long time.
Yes.
Then we have a long history and trajectory of not only educating students in a very, very good way, but educating students and connecting them to workplaces that can help and make a difference.
Right.
And that is a very good way to engage with community and to, again, show the value of higher education, is that it is about learning and research and all those wonderful things. And it's also about connecting talent where it's needed in society.
And so, I think that really comes back to that whole reflection piece and the quality of work integrated learning, because it helps students tile these things together. And so we talk about reflection as an essential part of the purposeful work model. And in this season of the podcast, we focused individual podcasts on those individual pieces of the purposeful work model. So I want to kind of go back to the whole model and bring that all together and how reflection kind of does that. And so just as a reminder for the audience or people who haven't seen the podcast before, can you briefly describe the pieces of that model and how that all then comes together?
Sure, yeah. And the purposeful work model is that we have here at Waterloo is based on the Japanese concept of ikigai. So those who are familiar with that, then this will make total sense. And it's made up of these various components that intersect towards purpose clarity. And those various components are basically, what is it that matters to me? What do I value? So that's one component.
Right.
The next component is, well, what am I good at or could be good at or could develop skills in or have talents around, right? Because you may love opera singing, but you're not going to be an opera singer because you just don't have the chops.
Right.
Okay, so you need to have that piece around understanding what am I good at or could be good at. Then the third component is, well, what is the world asking of me? What difference do I want to make? What problems might I want to solve? What impact might I want to have? So that's another component of the model.
Right.
And the fourth one really is, okay, so how am I going to engage? What am I going to do next? And it's putting all those things together, and reflection is the fuel that allows for that mechanism to work. So, how do you know about what you value? How do you learn about that? What
Right.
do you do to learn about that? I'm asking you now.
Okay. I would say I take a look at, you know, where I spend a lot of my time and where my priorities lie, or where I wish they would lie a little better sometimes.
Yeah.
And really think about what matters to me personally.
Yeah. So you've just described reflection.
Yeah.
So you need to do that reflective. You need that pause to think about, what does matter to me, right? So
Right.
that's where reflective practice helps support that. So we're not just going through life blindly. We're pausing and we're thinking.
Right.
So that we can answer those 4 questions. And then again, if I ask you, so where are your strengths? What are your skills? What is the special sauce that you bring to a situation? Then again, that gives you a chance to think about that and say, what is that? And it's unique for every person.
For sure.
Right? And it's very special for every person, which is why the purposeful work concept is sounds very simple in how it's portrayed, but it's really quite hard to reflect on that stuff in a way that is actually meaningful, not just kind of glibly.
Right.
And then I think when we look at what difference do you want to make, what problems do you want to solve, how do you want to show up in the world, again, that takes time to reflect. In the case of the skills component, we use the Future Ready Talent Framework to help students think about those skills and those categories of skills. In the case of the impact work, we use the UN SDGs because there's such a broad framework for a whole range of issues and areas that can be challenges to be solved. And they can be really touch every industry, every discipline, every kind of way that a student wants to show up. So it's not prejudging anything really. And then in the component that's engagement, what do you do next? What happens next? How do you support and sustain yourself in this journey? Because what we've also done with purposeful work is moved along the continuum from just get a job, any job, maybe just get a co-op job, now you're done. But really, what's the point of that job? How is it helping you, again, through reflection that you do in the various components of the time you're in the work term? What does that mean around what do you value? Do you still value that stuff? Where are your skills? Maybe those have changed now. Now that you've been in a workplace, are you seeing more problems, a different context that you may want to show up? And that's the engagement piece. So all of that comes together because we feel that in this day and age, with the increasing amounts of uncertainty that we are all facing, basing our work on let's help you get a job out the door is not enough.
Right.
We need to be equipping students on how can they make sense of who they are in this world? How can they develop that sense of purpose, which I liken to a navigational aid? So in the fog and the mist and the confusion, you can hang on to that navigational aid, and that will help you take the next step, whatever that might be. And the next step might be, I'm going to do some kind of volunteer work to help me get whatever it is I need to go further. The next step might be, I'm ready to graduate now and I'm going to go here, whatever that next step is.
Right.
And that's what the purposeful work concept does. So it's evolving our work from a job placement, getting a work term, organization, to one that through our programming and supports and reflective exercises helps students light that navigational aid for themselves and have the skills to do something about it.
Right. And so we often hear a lot about Waterloo's a pretty intensive university. And, when you're flipping between work terms and study terms, it can seem overwhelming. So where do students start with the purposeful work model? Is there an order? Can they start anywhere? How do they kind of jump into that?
Well, if they're on a co-op work term, they'll be jumping into it when they do their major reflective report, okay? Because we've built those concepts into that.
Right.
And that's an entry point. They can jump into it when they engage with any of our staff, whether it's a co-op advisor, whether it's a career advisor, because they're all using the similar construct.
Right.
You can start anywhere you want. And I don't see it as an extra piece of work. What it is helping you make sense of it. It's helping you answer, well, what the heck was the point of all that? And what do I do next?
Right.
Because it can feel overwhelming if you're just doing all this activity and you can't make sense of it.
Right.
So we're providing a framework to help make sense of it. So instead of it feeling like, oh my goodness, and it's just overwhelming,
Right.
it's like, oh, okay, well, I've done that, and that makes sense here, and I have a sense of what I want to do next. Yeah. So again, it's providing that navigational aid. It's not just, here's a whole pile of roadmaps we're chucking at you, and good luck.
Right.
We'll see you on the other side, right?
Well, and I think, when we help students look at it that way, that it's part of the journey, it's part of the discovery, which they're at the perfect time in their lives to do, even though it may, when they hear about it, seem like, oh, this is one more step for me to do, one more thing. But what I think a lot of them don't realize is that it helps them figure out that laddering effect we often talk about. I might need some skills in an area first before I'm ready for that job. Actually, say I'm a health student and wanting to work in a clinic, I can't do the hands-on stuff right away, but I might be an administrative assistant, but I'm going to see how the business works. I'm going to see how everything works. I'm going to work on my social skills and hear so much of what's happening to get a sense of where that is and really reflect on that. And then take that afterwards, and it almost helps them get their next resume and cover letter ready because they've done that reflection. It makes it easy to take that next step. And as you said, it's a navigational tool that they can use to help them through that.
Exactly. See, that wasn't so hard, was it?
No, not.
I think it very much, you've articulated it very well. That's exactly it. And it does not have to be complicated and a big, heavy lift. No, it's just like, hey, let's sort this out so you know what to do next.
Yeah.
That's
and
it.
You know what? Sometimes we all need that reminder just to pause.
Don't
Because we don't enough. It's, again, especially as a student, I'm sure they've got so much happening, and it's just that study term, work term, study term, work term. But reminding them to take that pause and how important it is.
Well, and I think you raise a good point, Jody, that we all need to be thinking about these things because we all need a sense of purpose, don't we? And there's been a lot of connection to that, and hope, and future focused, and positivity, and mental health, and awareness. And I think that this is something that is a benefit to all of us, actually, as we think about who are we, why are we here, what are we doing, and what do we do next?
Right. And so, that actually goes into my next question really well. We're talking to students about this, but how can we, how does talking to our students about this really benefit our employers then?
Well, I think we are also talking to our employers about it, so they're aware of this too.
Right.
And coming back to a comment I made earlier, employers don't want some random person showing up going, I don't know why I'm here, but I'll do your work if you want me to.
Right.
Who wants an employee like that? Most people want employees who say, yeah, no, I have a sense of why I'm here. I understand this job. I understand this is what I'm going to do. And these are the skills I'm looking to develop and work hard on, be motivated about, and be committed to as an employee in your organization, because I see how this connects to where I'm going next. That's the kind of employee people want.
Right.
And so helping students think about this in advance helps them be more intentional when they're on the work term.
Right.
And that leads to deeper levels of commitment and motivation. And most employers benefit from that. That's what they want.
Right.
And we all know what it's like to have an employee who doesn't really know why they're there, doesn't really understand what they're doing and how it connects, doesn't really care. and is on to the next thing.
Right. And I think it's why we hear feedback from employers that our students are far more ready for the job when they get there than students from some other institutions, is because we've done that work with them and talked to them about the importance of that. So how can employers help students, and really even their own permanent employees, really understand and support this model, or even, if they don't think so much about the model, but the way of thinking?
Well, I think it's by asking those simple questions that I laid out earlier. I think the simple questions can be for any employee and ourselves. What is it that matters to you? What is it you're good at or could be good at? What difference do you want to make? And how are you going to show up? Yeah.
And how do we encourage students to approach that conversation with an employer?
Well, I think that we can, in prepping our students for having a successful work term, one of the key components of having a successful work term is getting good critical feedback.
Right.
And ideally, an employer will offer that of their own volition. And there are midterm check-ins or whatever. There's a process around that. Not everybody does.
Yep.
Not everybody does. So I think students, it behooves them to have that agency and advocacy for themselves. And I think that's approaching a conversation with their supervisor around those things is the way to start. And it's not about performance. It's not about any kind of confrontation in any sort of way. But it's, look, I'm on this work term, and this is what I understand of the job. This is how I'd like to show up. This is how it connects to what I'm looking for myself and my education and my next steps. Does that make sense to you as supervisor? Is there something more I should be thinking about? That kind of thing.
And we see the results of that in our co-op Students of the Year, which is one of my favorite events that we do every year, because we really see that connection that the students are making to their work terms and their previous work terms, and bringing that all together and really showing up every day and asking those important questions and having employers that support them so strongly.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
It really is.
Aren't we in good work?
We are.
Yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah. Well, and we get to see, I think for us, we get to see that purpose.
Exactly. That's our purpose.
Exactly.
And it's wonderful, isn't it? And it provides a navigational aid, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you for tuning into this conversation with Associate Provost of Cooperative and Experiential Education, Dr. Nora McRae. Subscribe to listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or you can watch our whole conversation on YouTube. Please check the show notes for all of our social media platforms so you can stay up to date on what's happening in cooperative and experiential education. See you again for the next episode of Work, Learn, Repeat.